"Leave her in the snow," Lavinia said from the orchestra steps. Rosamund crossed the threshold anyway, her hand already opening the dark shawl around the hidden child. The music tripped and caught itself. 500 candles burned on, but every face beneath them turned toward the doors, where a woman with snow still bright on her shoulders walked into the room that had thrown her away. From inside the wool came a small voice, pitched for her alone. "Will he know me now, Mama?" "He will answer us before everyone," Rosamund said. Matthias, Duke of Eversham, stood at the center of the floor. He knew the boy's name. He had never seen his face. Rosamund drew back the first fold of the shawl. The previous morning, Milo ducked beneath Eversham's dropping gate. "Ask him today, Mama." Rosamund lunged and caught his coat before the porter set the bar. The iron came down where his head had been a breath before. Fear went through her like cold water. Then it turned to anger, which was easier to carry. "He is 5 years old," she said to the porter. "You saw him." "I saw what I was told to see," the porter said, and did not look at her. Lavinia came down the drive without hurrying, furred to the chin, lovely. 6 years had not marked her at all. That seemed to Rosamund the most unjust thing yet. "6 years have not taught you when a door is closed," Lavinia said. "It taught me whose hand was on it." Dorcas Baird was already there, come up from the gate lodge at the shouting. She gathered Milo against her side and bundled him, shawl and all, through the lodge door. Down the village path, a man on foot was near enough to see it happen, but from behind, and wrapped as the boy was, Matthias of Eversham saw only a child-sized bundle in an old woman's arms, before the door shut on it. What he saw plainly was his wife. He stopped walking. Rosamund watched recognition strike him and stay struck. He looked at her the way a man looks at a fire in a house he thought had long since burned down. "Rosamund," he said, "Your Grace." She was leaving, Lavinia said smoothly, coming to his side as if the place were fitted to her. "I have already dealt with it." "Have you?" He looked at the lowered bar, at the porter who would not raise his eyes, at the snow driving in slantwise from the moor. "Then it is fortunate the door is mine. Open it." The porter moved so fast he fumbled the pin twice. "Matthias," Lavinia began. "The gate," he said, and did not look at her. Something in Lavinia's beautiful face closed like a fan. The bar went up. Matthias came through his own gate to stand before his own wife. For a moment, neither of them managed anything at all. Snow gathered on his shoulders. He had grown older in the eyes, she thought. She was glad of it. It would have been unbearable if the years had cost him nothing. "Come inside," he said. "Come up to the house. On one condition." Her voice stayed level, and she was proud of it, because nothing else in her was level. "There is a child in that lodge. He stays with Dorcas, warm, fed, and unquestioned, until you can hear his name without treating it as an accusation. He is not a charge laid against you. He will not be handled as one. Whose child is he? That is exactly the question you may not ask at a gate." She stepped past the bar, past Lavinia, close enough that he could see the cold had cracked her lip, and she had come anyway. "I came for an answer in your own voice. I will not accept another woman's, not ever again." She walked up the drive ahead of him, spine straight as a mast, and did not look back at the lodge, because if she looked back, she would go back. She had not crossed 6 winters to stop at the last 100 yards. Behind her, Lavinia stood very still in the falling snow. She was watching the lodge door, not the Duke, not the wife. The door, as if she already knew precisely what was behind it, and was measuring how long she had left. The gate lodge smelled of wood smoke and wet wool. Milo sat on the hearth bench working at a sodden boot with both hands. When it finally surrendered, he held it up like a trophy. "A grand house," he announced, ought to have gates a boy can outrun. What is the use of all that iron if it only catches children?" "It caught nothing," Dorcas said, hanging the boot to steam. "You are here, aren't you?" "I nearly wasn't." He said it with relish. Rosamund's heart, which had not settled since the gate, squeezed once, hard, and let go. He shed his stockings, stood on the warm flags, and began to practice. 1, 2, and the turn. The 3 steps he had been drilling all winter for a floor he had never seen. He got the turn wrong again, spinning out too wide and fetching up against the table. "You rush it," Dorcas said. "The music rushes it," said Milo, with dignity. Then, not looking at his mother, in the too light voice he used for heavy things, "Does he have to like me?" Rosamund crossed and knelt so their eyes were level. "Listen to me. You are not here to audition for anyone's love. You are here because you asked a fair question, and he owes it a reply. Whatever he does with it is a weight on his ledger, never on yours. If he does not want me, may I still dance with you? You will dance with me whether a duke knows your worth or not." He nodded, satisfied as a magistrate, and went back to his 3 steps. Dorcas drew Rosamund to the window. The old woman's face was soft and grim at once. "You've not told him the whole of it. The boy. He knows his father never came. He does not know why, because I did not know why. For 6 years I believed Matthias heard I was carrying and wanted neither of us. Saying it aloud still hurt, a clean old ache, like a badly set bone in wet weather. It was Lavinia who brought me the message, Dorcas, the week he was away burying his father. She stood in my own morning room and told me the Duke said the child could not be his and would not be received, that I was to be gone before he returned, for my own dignity's sake. And I believed her, because she spoke as though she were only the mouth and he the voice. You found me on the moor road that night. You know what the snow was like. I know I put you by this fire, and you couldn't speak for an hour, Dorcas said. I have hated that woman with a whole heart ever since, and I am a church-going body. Then why now? Rosamund said it to herself as much as to Dorcas, because she had turned the question all winter like a coin. Why not 5 years ago? Because I could never get past her, that's why. She held every door of that house, the steward, the porters, every servant who decided whose knock was heard. And I would not carry my baby into a household that had already refused him once. So I built us a life, a widow's schoolroom to teach in, a name, bread of my own earning. I taught other people's children who was allowed to speak in a room and who got spoken over. And all the while my own son. She stopped, steadied. 2 things changed, Dorcas. You wrote me this winter that Matthias once rode out searching for me. Searched a road, you said, in the first weeks. And Milo turned 5 and began asking for his father in his own voice. In the village she had passed as Dorcas's widowed niece, Mrs. Rosamund Baird. A deserted duchess and an unacknowledged son attract questions a schoolroom cannot afford. She looked at the boy, counting his steps to himself by the fire. You are old enough to ask for him yourself, she said, loud enough for Milo to hear it and know it was his. And this winter I learned he once rode out looking. A man who looks was lied to. A man who was lied to can still be asked for the truth. The lodge door opened without a knock. Lavinia came in on a breath of cold. Lavinia Fane had entered Eversham as the late Duke's widowed goddaughter. The late Duke had raised her almost as a daughter. When Matthias went to bury him, the household keys and the correspondence had stayed in the goddaughter's practised hands. She had no fortune of her own. Eversham was the only home she possessed. An heir would end the position she had mistaken for ownership. Only after Rosamund was believed gone had she become Matthias's mistress. The county called her his companion. 6 years of his silence had let that polite fiction acquire command. Behind her, a tall woman with clever, hungry eyes swept the little room, pricing every stick of it. "Lady Imogen Whitcomb, an earl's daughter," Lavinia said, by way of nothing. "We are come with kindness, Mrs. Forgive me, I never can keep your arrangements straight. The roads are still open southward. It would be a mercy to yourself to be on them before the ball." "I have an invitation to the house," Rosamund said. The owner extended it personally. "The owner is sentimental in winter." Lavinia's gaze went past her to Milo and stopped. For half a heartbeat, something moved under the loveliness. Rosamund saw it and could not yet name it. "You paraded an impossible child at my gate once. Do not do it twice." "At your gate," Rosamund said. "Hear yourself, Lavinia. Even you have stopped pretending it is his." Imogen laughed. "A bright social instrument. A borrowed child is the oldest door a cast-off wife can knock upon." Milo stopped mid-step and looked at her. A long, level 5-year-old look. "I'm not borrowed," he said. "I'm Milo." "Out," said Dorcas Baird pleasantly, taking up the poker to tend a fire that did not need it. "This lodge is mine to keep, my lady, and I keep it warm. You'll find it cold for you." They went. Through the window, Rosamund watched Lavinia pause on the path, watching the lodge again, the door, the latch. This time she named what she had seen move beneath that beautiful face. It was not contempt, it was fear. Matthias did not summon her to a study or a parlour. He asked, through Dorcas, in words that began with, "if it would not trouble her grace," to meet him in the great hall at noon. Rosamund understood the choice of ground at once. The great hall had doors on 4 sides, and servants passing through all of them. Whatever was said there would be witnessed. He had picked the one room in the house where nothing could be done to her quietly. She gave him credit for it, carefully, and kept the rest of her guard up. He stood when she entered, 6 years a duke, and he still rose the second she crossed the threshold, too quickly, all his rank forgotten. "I have one question," he said, "and I have earned none, so you may refuse it. Why did you leave me?" The hall went very quiet around its edges. A footman by the sideboard stopped mid-pour, the wine hanging a bright thread from the bottle's lip. "I will trade you," Rosamund said. "My wife for yours. You first. Did you hear me name another man?" He frowned. "I was told. That is not what I asked. In 6 years of believing what you believed, my voice, my mouth, my words at any hour, in any room, did you hear me name another man?" The silence stretched long enough to hurt. She watched him walk backward through his own memory and find the room empty. For the length of it, her mind slipped past the 4 doors and down the drive, to the lodge where her son sat wrapped in her shawl, counting his steps by Dorcas's fire. "No," Matthias said. "Then you did not believe me. You believed a woman speaking in the space where I should have stood." Her voice did not rise. Schoolmistresses learn early that the level voice carries furthest. "Every word of my leaving came to you through Lavinia Fane. Every word of your casting out came to me the same way. 2 rooms, 1 mouth, and neither of us ever thought to walk down the corridor. I came twice more after she shut the gate on my son," Rosamund said. "Did you know that?" "No. Once your porter turned me back. Once your steward did, repeating her words as yours. I would not carry him to a 3rd refusal." "That is a lie assembled with some skill," said Lavinia from the west doorway. She came in unhurried, Imogen at her shoulder, and addressed the hall at large as though it were hers. "Your Grace, you are tired, and grief makes the tired credulous. I was there. I carried what I was given, no more." "There," Rosamund said to Matthias, almost gently. "Watch it happen. You asked me a question. Her voice is the one making the reply. 6 years, Matthias. This is how it was done." Matthias looked at Lavinia. Rosamund saw the look land, saw him see it, truly, for the first time, the smooth interposition, graceful as a dance step, of one woman between two people trying to reach each other. "I have not addressed you," he said to Lavinia. The words came out level and cold. "When I do, you will know it." Colour moved in Lavinia's face and was mastered. Imogen chose that moment to be helpful. "This is all very affecting," she said, "but surely the practical matter is simpler. Mrs. Baird, forgive me. I understand you go by the good widow's name in your village, has a long road south, and the weather—" "Her Grace," Matthias said. Imogen blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "Her Grace. My wife. You will remember both." He did not raise his voice. The hall heard every word of it anyway. By the sideboard the footman set the bottle down untasted. Near the stair, the housekeeper's ring of keys, which chimed with her every breath, went perfectly still. A maid stepped backward into the doorway she had just come through, eyes wide, gathering gossip like windfall apples. "The Duchess of Eversham was married in the chapel where my father lies. In the chapel of this house," he said. "The roughness in it went through Rosamund like a blade, and no door on this estate will be closed to her again. Any hand that closes one may follow it out. That is the whole of my meaning, and I will not repeat it. It was not love restored. Rosamund knew exactly what it was and what it was not. It was a man putting a fact back on its shelf in public, because he had learned it was knocked off the shelf in private. But the housekeeper curtsied to her. The footman bowed. Something 6 years frozen in Rosamund's chest cracked, painfully, an ice sheet in first thaw. She found she had to look at the window for a moment before she could speak. "Thank you," she said at last. "I will keep the green guest room, if the house can spare it. The Duchess's apartments are aired, I'm sure, and lovely, and not mine today," she said it plainly, without cruelty. "You have given me back my name in front of your household, and I am glad to have it. The rest is not restored by giving orders about doors. You will have to come the long way, Matthias, the same road as everyone. I have only moved the gate to where it always should have stood." She curtsied, correct to the inch, Duchess to Duke, and left by the east doors. Behind her, she heard Lavinia's voice, dropped low, pitched for him alone. Rosamund did not slow down. She did not need to. Whatever that voice was arranging now, in 2 days it would have to do its arranging in front of everyone. The winter gallery ran the south face of the house, 40 windows of low gold afternoon. Nobody had told the room that 6 years had passed. The same worn strip of carpet down the centre, the same cold marble boys holding up lamps. This was where he had taught her the Eversham reels the month before their wedding. 1, 2, and turn, he would count against her ear, both of them laughing too hard to finish a figure. She had walked into it without thinking, because it was the shortest way from the east stair. That was a lie, and she knew it was a lie while she was telling it to herself. He was there, of course, exactly as she had known he would be. "I used to come here when I could not sleep," Matthias said. He stood at the middle window with the light on him. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. "Which was most nights, the first year. I would stand about here and try to recall whether the fault was in the figure or the count. Whether there was a single evening I could put my finger on and say, 'There, that is where I lost her. That is the step I missed.'" "And what did you conclude?" "Nothing. I concluded nothing, and then I stopped coming, because a man can only afford so much of that." He turned to face her. "I know about stopping, Rosamund. I will have more to say about stopping, and soon, and it will not flatter me. But not first. First, there is a thing I want to say while I have the courage, and it cannot wait for me to deserve it." Snow had come loose from her hood in the stairwell. She could feel it melting at her temple. He crossed the gallery slowly, the way you approach a horse that has been beaten by a man of your shape, and stopped an arm's length away. "May I?" he said, and lifted his hand a little. Nobody had asked her permission for anything in 6 years. Landlords, school governors, parsons. The world instructed a woman alone. It did not ask her. The asking undid something in her that all his orders about doors had not touched. "Yes," she said. He brushed the melted snow from her hairline with the backs of 2 fingers. So lightly she felt the warmth more than the touch. His hand shook, very slightly. She watched him notice her noticing, and elect, with some dignity, not to pretend otherwise. "You asked what I wanted to say." His voice had gone low. "It is this. Whatever is true of the child in that lodge, whoever fathered him, whatever your years held, whatever it costs me in this county's parlours, I want my wife back. Even if that child carries no drop of my blood, I am asking for you." The words went through her like heat through a cold hand, painful and wanted, and very nearly enough. She was close enough to see the pulse in his throat. He bent his head. She lifted hers. The gallery seemed to hold its lungs still, and her hand came up flat against his chest and stopped it. His heart was slamming under her palm. Hers was no steadier. That was precisely the trouble. The wanting had never been the broken part. "You do not yet know what you are asking," she said. "I know whom." "That is a beautiful thing to say, and I am going to keep it," she said, and let her hand fall. "But no, Matthias, not here in a pretty room in private, where being sorry is easy and costs you nothing. This house was taught to despise me. It was taught in the open, at gates, in halls, before servants and neighbours, at Christmas tables I was not at. You cannot repeal all that with your hand in my hair where no one can see. If you want your wife, you will ask for her where you let the house despise her. In the open, before them all. That is my price, and it is not negotiable, and you should think hard before you pay it, because it cannot be taken back afterward." He held her gaze. "And the ball is tomorrow night. The ball is tomorrow night. A wife returns with snow on her hem and expects it to pass for innocence." Lavinia stood at the gallery's far door, framed and lovely, a shawl of Indian silk over her arms. She had been there long enough. It was in her face. She had seen the hand, the bent head, the near thing. Her composure sat on top of something that had begun, quietly, to slide. "Repeat that tomorrow," Rosamund said, "when every door is open. You imagine tomorrow belongs to you." "No, I imagine it belongs to whoever tells the truth in front of witnesses. You have had 6 years to become fond of the other arrangement." Rosamund gathered her skirts and gave Matthias one last look, direct, unhurried, and with nothing in it hidden. "Tomorrow night, ask well." She left by the long way, past all 40 windows, and made herself walk slowly, because her blood was loud and her mouth still remembered almost. A schoolmistress knows better than anyone that almost is the most dangerous word in the language. At the lodge, late that afternoon, Milo was at his 3 steps again, 1, 2, and the turn while Dorcas clapped the count for him. He took the turn too soon and sat down hard on the hearthrug and glared at the floor as if the floor had done it. "You'll have it by tomorrow night," Dorcas said comfortably. "I have to have it by tomorrow night," said Milo. "There isn't another night after." Rosamund was on the path outside, a basket on her arm, near enough to the cracked window to hear the count, and near enough to see the 2 figures come up from the drive and let themselves in without knocking, again, as if latches were a thing that happened to other people. "So this is where it's kept," Lavinia said. Through the glass, Rosamund saw her cross the little room toward Milo, and saw the boy stand up from the rug, not retreating, just standing, feet planted and chin level. Rosamund's body was already moving for the door. Lavinia reached down and took hold of the shawl at his shoulder, Rosamund's shawl, the dark wool he'd been bundled in since the gate, and pulled to bear his face to the light. Milo put his small hand flat on the wool and held it. "No," he said, "you may ask my name. You may not pull at me." "It speaks," said Imogen, delighted. "He speaks," said Dorcas, and moved, a stout woman of 57 crossing a small room like weather coming, and her hand closed on Lavinia's wrist and lifted it away with a laundress's grip. "Not in this lodge, my lady. Not while I keep it." Lavinia straightened. She looked down at the boy, at the dark hair, at the wool he held shut at his throat. Rosamund, coming through the door, on the end of it, caught the strangest thing in her face. Not scorn. Effort. As if not seeing were work she had been doing a long time, and had grown heavy from it. "No amount of borrowed wool," Lavinia said, "makes an impossible boy a son." "Then why do you keep trying to see my face?" said Milo. The room went silent. On the hearth a log settled. Imogen's smile forgot itself for a moment. Even she looked at Lavinia, the look holding a question. "Get him ready for the road," Lavinia said at the door, to no one in particular, in a voice that had lost a shade of its music. "This ends tomorrow, one way or the other." And they were gone up the drive, two dark figures against the snow. Dorcas put Milo back to his steps with a jam tart for wages. Then she drew Rosamund to the far corner. Her voice dropped to the register of things said once. "There is a piece of that night I never told you," she said. "Not the night I found you on the moor road. The other one. When you came back with him, 6 weeks old, in that same wool, and they turned you from the gate the second time. I was there, Dorcas. You were at the bars, 10 feet off, with the snow coming down. I was inside the gate, holding him, while she looked. You never saw her face. I did. Dorcas's hands, which never stopped, knitting, kneading, folding, had gone perfectly still. She opened the blanket herself, both hands, slow, dreading it. She looked a long, long time, his little face, and then his shirt had ridden up, and she saw the mark, the red one, the little forked branch below his left collarbone, over the heart, and Rosamund, she flinched. Because his father has it, she would know better than anyone. Same place, same fork. Old Eversham had it too. I nursed in that house. I've seen 3 generations wear it. She saw the mark when he was 6 weeks old. She knew before she shut the gate. She looked at me holding him, and she knew I knew. And she said, 'Take that to the church door like the rest of them.' And that Whitcomb woman laughed. That laugh has been in my ears 6 years. Rosamund stood very still. Inside her, something enormous turned over slowly, like a ship coming about. She had believed all these years that Lavinia had lied blind, spite flung in the dark, not knowing what it cost. It was worse. It was so much worse. Lavinia had opened the blanket. Lavinia had seen Matthias's own mark on a 6-week-old heart, had understood exactly what she was holding at that gate, his son, the heir of everything, and had ordered it back into the snow, and gone in to her supper. "She has known him all along," Rosamund said. Her voice came out very quiet and very clear. "And she will have her chance. One chance tomorrow, before them all, to tell the truth with her own mouth. And when she spends it on the lie instead." She looked at Milo, turning, getting it wrong, laughing at himself this time. "Then I open the shawl. Me. No one else's hands. And God help her, because I will not." She found Matthias in the courtyard at dusk, bareheaded in the cold, overseeing the hanging of the ice lanterns, with the distracted thoroughness of a man doing anything rather than think. When he saw her face, he sent the footman off with a word. "Something has changed," he said. Something has changed. She had rehearsed a dozen gentler roads on the walk up, and discarded them all. He had asked to be treated as someone who could bear the truth. She would pay him the compliment of believing it. "You asked me, at the gate, whose child that is. I am going to tell you now, and I ask one thing first, that you stand still and hear all of it before you move. Can you do that? Yes. I was carrying your child when Lavinia put me into the snow. She watched the words land, watched him take them like deep water, the breath the stagger held. 8 weeks gone, I knew it that morning. I had told the housekeeper to air the old nursery. Lavinia made her tell why. That was how she knew before you did. I had been saving it for your return, because you had just buried your father and I wanted to hand you a joy, not a letter. She reached you first with her lie, and me with hers. The boy at the lodge is Milo. He is 5 years old. He is your son, Matthias. Matthias stood very still. The lantern light moved on his face, and nothing else did. When he finally spoke, his voice came out stripped, all the Duke gone from it. I have a son. You have a son. He was in the snow, both of you, that night. You were... He turned away, one full turn, like a man in a doorway too small for what he carried, and came back with his eyes wet and perfectly steady. Take me to him. Now, please. No. She said it as kindly as a wall can be kind. Hear the rest. He does not know you're his father like a debt on a ledger. He knows a story, and tomorrow he will decide what to do with the ending. He will not meet you tonight, in a corridor pulled from his bed to be looked at, a small suspect brought up for inspection. My son is not a lock you may try until it opens. The breath went out of him. She watched him fight it, the title, the habit, 6 years of every door in the county opening at his step, and win. Then tell me where to stand, Matthias said, and I will wait there. Something in her chest that had been braced since the gate came down off its guard, just slightly. Tomorrow, she said, at the ball. He wants to come. It is his own asking, and Dorcas will be with him. What happens there must happen in front of everyone, and I will tell you why tomorrow. Tonight I ask only, what is this? Lavinia had come out under the arch, dressed for dinner, diamonds at her throat throwing back the lantern light. She looked from one of them to the other. Rosamund saw her measure the distance between their bodies to the inch. Whatever she has told you, Lavinia said, I hope your Grace has kept his wits. A woman surfaces after 6 years, penniless, with a child of convenient age and no proof but her own mouth. A moment ago, Matthias said, I asked her to take me to the boy. She refused me. He let that sit. Study it, Lavinia. You are cleverer than I am. It should trouble you more. The schemer you describe would have had that child in my lap by sunset. She has built her fence against me instead. Every lie I have ever been fed in this house came dressed as protection. And here is the one person asking nothing, and I am asked to believe she is the liar. An impostor's patience is still, you will not answer for me again. He did not shout it. It fell like the gate bar. Not to her, not to my household, not to a single soul in this county. Whatever you have been in this house, that office is ended tonight. You will not stand at my side tomorrow. You will not make my meanings. If I am asked a question, I will be the one who replies to it, though it take me the rest of my life to relearn the habit. Lavinia's chin came up. 6 years of ownership do not fall in one blow. Hers did not. But Rosamund, watching, saw the first crack run the length of the porcelain. You would take her word, Lavinia said softly, over all my years. Send her up to pack then, Rosamund said, before he could reply, and both of them turned to her startled. That is what you are about to do, Matthias, quietly. A carriage at dawn, a settlement, a house somewhere discreet. The whole thing folded away with no one watching. No. Her schoolroom voice, the one that stopped fights, she did nothing quietly. What she did before servants and porters and laughing friends. She will stand in that ballroom tomorrow like everyone else, and she will have her one chance to say true things in front of the county she has spent 6 years managing. She has earned the audience. Let her keep it. Lavinia looked at Rosamund for a long moment. What moved behind her eyes was cold and quick, a gambler shown the table and finding it, on balance, survivable. Tomorrow, then, she said. and swept into dinner as though she had arranged it all herself. Matthias watched her go, then quietly. "The hours between now and midnight tomorrow, may I have them? Not to plead my case, to learn how to listen. That is all I am asking for." "You may have the hours," Rosamund said. "The forgiveness is a separate ledger, and it is not yet open." "That is more than I had this morning," he said, and bowed to her, a full bow, court deep, in his own courtyard, while the servants hung lanterns all around them and pretended not to see. By the next evening, the snow had turned serious. It came down all afternoon in fat, businesslike flakes, while the house filled, carriages arriving early to beat the weather, guests shaking themselves in the hall like retrievers, the county pouring in with its diamonds and its appetite. By the time the household gathered on the terrace for the lighting of the ice lanterns, the drive was vanishing, and the sky promised more. The lanterns were an Eversham custom older than anyone present. Globes of river ice with candles set inside, lining the terrace balustrade, lit one by one at first dark. Guests crowded the steps to watch. Rosamund stood among them in her plain dark dress like a semicolon in a page of exclamations. She felt the whispers move around her, warm breath and cold intent. Imogen chose her moment with a professional's timing, the lull between lanterns, half the county in earshot. "Duchess." She let the title glitter so everyone could hear the blade in it. "We are all so glad of your health, and the child at the gate lodge, such a mystery, and mysteries at 12th Night are so diverting. Won't you settle a wager and tell us plainly, is the boy his grace's?" The terrace went still. Even the footman with the lighting taper paused at the fourth lantern. Rosamund turned, unhurried. 6 years of standing in front of rooms that wanted her to flinch. "There is a child at the lodge," she said clearly to all of it. "He is 5 years old, and he has not offered himself for the county's entertainment, and until he does, I will not spend him for it. You may have me instead, Lady Imogen, since you're wagering, but you have asked the wrong question of the wrong person." She looked across the terrace and found Matthias already looking back. "Do not ask me what he is. Ask the Duke what I am." Matthias came through the crowd without haste, took the taper from the footman's hand, and lit the next lantern himself, so that the light came up on his face as he spoke, and every soul on that terrace saw him plainly. "My wife," he said. "With or without a son, she is my wife." The terrace paid it out in small change. A fan snapped shut somewhere to the left. Two dowagers turned to each other so fast their headdresses trembled. A young man set his glass down on the balustrade too hard. The crack of it carried. Someone began, unwisely, to murmur congratulation, and stopped. "I said it once 6 years ago before God," Matthias went on into the hush, "and said nothing when it mattered after, which is my shame and no one else's. I am saying it now in front of the county, so that there can be no confusion in any drawing-room by Epiphany. The Duchess of Eversham is home. How long she stays is her affair. Whether she is honoured while she stands here is mine." He handed back the taper and offered Rosamund his arm. Offered, palm open, a question and not a claim, and after one long breath she took it, to a sound from the crowd like a wave pulling back over shingle. Lavinia had watched it all from the top step, flawless in silver, a still point in the swirling snow. Now she came down through the guests with her glass held high. The smile she wore was the most frightening thing Rosamund had seen in 6 winters, because it was genuine. "How moving," she said, pitched to Carrie. "Then let us do it thoroughly. At midnight, I give the 12th Night toast, my privilege these 6 years, and I find I am sentimental about it. At midnight, I will end this impossible child for good." She said it caressingly, like a hostess promising a treat. "The tale of him, I mean. Of course. What else could I mean?" She drank, alone, to a silence that did not know what to do with itself. "Midnight, then. Wrap up warmly, Duchess. You know how the weather turns on you." She went in. The guests began, too loudly to talk about the lanterns. 2 men chosen by Rosamund, not Lavinia, and not the steward, kept the lodge path until midnight. Their order was to admit no one Dorcas did not name. At the balustrade, the steward murmured to Matthias that the village road was closed. Drifts to the axle at the bottom of the hill, nothing on wheels leaving tonight. Matthias looked out at the white and falling dark, at his snowbound house packed with every witness the county owned. "Good," he said. "Then nobody misses the end of it." An hour before the ball opened, in the small parlour off the Winter Gallery, Dorcas Baird sat down in front of the Duke of Eversham, with her work-bag in her lap like a shield, and told him to his face what she had seen with her own eyes. Rosamund stood at the window and let it be done. This was not her testimony to give. "Twice, your grace," Dorcas said. "I'll give you both, and you'll sit still for both. The first you now know the shape of. 3 nights after your father went, I found your wife on the moor road past midnight, 8 weeks gone with your child, and she did not weep, sir, which was worse. I put her by my sister's fire, 11 mile off, and held my tongue, because she made me swear it." Matthias sat with his forearms on his knees, head slightly bowed, and took it. The second was near 9 months after. She came back to the gate carrying him, 6 weeks in the world and wrapped in his christening cloth. And she asked, mind, only that his father be told he existed. It was not you came down to the gate. It was Madame Fane, with the Whitcomb woman for company. I was inside the bars holding the baby when she opened his blanket and saw the mark, the little red fork below the left collarbone. The one your own shirts hide, your grace. I watched her see it. I watched her know. And she folded the blanket closed, neat as a shopkeeper, and said, "Take that to the church door like the rest of them." And Lady Imogen laughed, and the gate was shut on your wife and your son in the snow. That is what I saw, and I will say it before any company you like, and I have wished 6 years I'd had the courage to climb your stairs and say it then. The clock on the mantel ticked through a long silence. "Thank you," Matthias said at last. His voice was under control, the way a broken thing is under a tarpaulin. "Now you'll hear my portion, both of you, because it is worse than you know. When I came home to an empty house, Lavinia told me my wife had confessed the child was another man's, and fled to him. And I—" He stopped, and made himself go on. "I asked her one question. One. I asked where. She named the South Road, toward Carsholt. I rode it for 2 days. 2 inns, a toll-keeper, a carrier's yard. No one had seen a lady travelling alone, because no lady had travelled that road, because my wife was 11 miles north the whole time." He looked up and let them see his face, and then I stopped. That is the part I have not said aloud in 6 years, not because the trail ended, because believing her false hurt less than the other thought, that she was out there wanting to be found, calling, and I had missed her. A man can be angry at a betrayer. There is no way to live with the other thing. So I chose the version I could survive, and I called it dignity, and I never asked another question. She lied. I supplied the silence that made the lie a life. Dorcas looked at him a long moment, then gathered her work-bag and stood. "I'll see to the boys' supper," she said, and to Rosamund at the door quietly, "He'll do," and was gone. The fire ticked as Rosamund came away from the window. "You are not asking me to forgive that," she said. "No, I have no right to the question, and you would be wrong to say yes to it tonight." He rose. "I am only telling you everything you would be taking back, if you took anything back. The lie was hers. The stopping was mine." He did not look away for the rest. "There is more. I believed myself betrayed, and I made the woman who brought me that lie my mistress. I gave her the place from which she had shut you out. What I believed explains it. It does not excuse it, That debt is mine too. Rosamund did not soften it for him. Yes, it is. Then do not apologize as a duke. Answer as my husband. As your husband. He was close now. The room had gone very quiet around them. As your husband. I was a proud fool, and my pride cost you 6 winters, and there is no midnight toast that pays that back. It gets paid like a debt, in installments, for years, beginning wherever you say. She had meant to keep the width of a chair between them. It was gone. She could not have said which of them had closed it. His hand came up, slowly, the question asked, and permitted the day before, and rested against her cheek, and her own hand rose and covered it, holding it there, and his breath went ragged, and so did hers, and every one of the 6 years was in the room with them, wanting. Tell me to stop, and I will, Matthias said. Stop. Her voice came out low and not at all steady, and her hand did not move from his. Not because I don't want to, because the room hasn't heard you yet. You made me a promise on a terrace, and I have made one to a 5-year-old, and neither is paid, and I will not take my portion early in a parlour with the door shut. That is the whole discipline I have left, Matthias, so help me keep it. He stepped back. It cost him visibly. He paid it, and she loved him for the paying, the word arriving in her like something walking home through snow, unannounced, 6 years late. Midnight, he said, and when the room has heard me, then you will hear me. 3 things, and I will say them where everyone can weigh them. No voice between us ever again, not hers, not anyone's. The boy named your son before he has ever named your heir. His knowing of you goes at his own pace, not the county's. If you cannot carry one of the 3, say so now, in private, and spare us all the floor. I can carry all 3, Matthias said. I intend to say so out loud. Midnight, then. She stopped at the door. There is one more consent you're waiting on, and it isn't mine. I go to ask him now. Whatever he decides, that is what happens. At the lodge, she knelt by the fire and put it to Milo plainly. He could come to the doors of the ball with her and Dorcas, or he could be asleep in this warm bed and meet his father in the morning, in daylight, with no one watching. His choice either way. Milo thought about it with his whole face. She said I wasn't anyone, he said at last. The Silver Lady, at the gate and again in this room, so I want to be there when he says my name. I want him to say it in the big room where she said I wasn't anyone. He picked at the rug and added the part that mattered most. So quietly she had to lean in. I want him to say my name. But Mamma opens the shawl, not her. Rosamund took his hands. One thing more, and I want it plain between us. They will see the mark beneath your collar. That is more of you than any room has a right to. Do you still choose it? If you open it, nobody else. No one touches the shawl but me, Rosamund said. That has always been the rule. It is still the rule. He nodded. Then, all business. If they play music after, I know my steps. Mostly. The Eversham ballroom on Twelfth Night was the county's one annual glimpse of heaven. 3 tiers of candles, the floor waxed to dark water, garlands of fir and gilded holly, and the press of every family of consequence within a snowbound 20 miles. The orchestra tuned. The ice lanterns burned along the terrace beyond the glass. Through it all moved Lavinia Fane, in white and silver, flawless, laughing at the right pitch, touching the right sleeves, a woman visibly certain that polish had beaten truth in every county in England since the conquest, and would win again tonight. Rosamund entered on no one's arm, in dove-grey silk the housekeeper had, weeping, altered for her overnight. The household had chosen sides with needle and thread. The room parted and murmured. She had stood in front of crueler rooms, smaller but crueler. Matthias came to her directly, in front of everyone, and bowed. The first dance is forming, he said. Duchess, will you stand up with me? The nearest 20 guests stopped breathing. "Ask me when everyone knows whom you are asking," Rosamund said gently, and watched him take it, the flicker of hurt, then the understanding arriving behind it, like the second, truer wave. Not yet, not as the mystery he was defying the county to honor. She would dance with him as one thing only, a thing the room could not yet name. "At midnight, then," he said, "I ask again," and bowed, and left her the floor's width of respect. Down at the lodge, Dorcas laid out the good clothes and the borrowed shoes, polished London shoes, sent up from some cousin's outgrown trunk, shining like chestnuts. Milo put one on, stood, took 2 of his steps, and took it off again. "They slide," he said. "They're for a boy who's never fallen down. I know how to stand in mine." His own were scuffed grey at the toes, resoled once by the village cobbler. He buckled them on with the gravity of a knight arming. Dorcas had the good sense not to fight him on it. She crouched and wrapped him in the shawl, his mother's dark shawl, the one he had ridden in as a baby, big enough now only to hood his head and cross his chest, and settled it just so, and looked at him. Warm, warm. Frightened, he considered. A little in my knees, not in my middle. "That's the correct arrangement," said Dorcas Baird. She took his hand, and they went out into the falling snow, up the long white drive toward the lit house, the music reaching them in gusts. In the ballroom, the clock hands climbed. At 10 minutes to midnight, the footman went round with the wine for the toast. Lavinia mounted the 2 shallow steps by the orchestra, glass in hand. The room gathered itself toward her out of 6 years of habit. "My friends," her voice was silver as the rest of her, 12 nights of Christmas, and on the 12th we tell the truth. Laughter warm and easy. She gathered it in and banked it. And the truth is that this house has been troubled these 2 days by a tale. You have all heard it by now. The returning wife, and waiting in the wings, a child. She smiled, and let the pause do its work. "I will say what your kindness will not. I have stood nearer this business than anyone in the county, and I tell you before God, I have never seen this supposed child. She invented him when grief stopped buying attention. There is no boy of consequence at that gate. There is a schoolmistress's stage prop, produced at the exact hour a lonely man's fortune wanted producing. The far doors were still open to the hall. Beyond them, small and dark against all that candlelight, 2 figures had come in from the snow. Imogen saw them first. She moved quickly along the wall toward the doors. Her voice cut brittle across the toast. "The doors, footman, the doors. The draught will kill the candles. Close the doors," Lavinia said from the orchestra steps. The hostess had gone out of her voice entirely. "Leave her in the snow." "Leave them open," Matthias said. He had not raised his voice. He had not moved from the floor's center. The room heard him. The footmen froze where they stood. Imogen stopped with her hand a foot from the door, and had, suddenly, the look of a woman a long way from shore. "On 12th night," he said, "this house's doors stand open. That is older custom than the toast. Go on, Lavinia. You were telling us what you have never seen." Lavinia's glass had a tremor in the surface of the wine now, the room's only moving thing. But she had wagered everything on polish, and polish held. "What I was telling you," she said, "is that some women, refused every honest door, will put a hired child in front of them and call it a key. Look at what stands there in the doorway, my friends, and ask what kind of mother brings." Outside the threshold, under the shawl, Milo's hand tightened in Rosamund's. He looked up at her. The candles, the silver woman, the 100 faces, all of it enormous. "Do I have to be brave?" he whispered. "No," Rosamund said. "You only have to choose whether the door opens." He looked into the light a moment longer. Then he nodded to himself, the small private nod he gave when a turn finally came out right, and his hand chose hers, and the door stood open. The shawl cleared Milo's face. Rosamund's hand kept moving, calm as a Sunday, and folded the wool back off his shoulder and eased the small collar loose. And there, below the left collarbone, over the heart, the forked red mark lay plain in the light of 500 candles, a little branching flame, the exact shape of winter lightning. The music did not so much stop as fail. A violin trailed off, mid-phrase, and hung there. The conductor's hand stayed in the air, forgotten. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman's hand went to her mouth. Somewhere else a man said, "God in heaven," into the hush, and no one reproved him. A gentleman beside the orchestra set down his full glass with great care and never looked at it again. Near the doors, an elderly baronet sat down on a gilt chair without meaning to, and stayed there. Matthias came across the empty floor. He did not run. He walked the way men walk in dreams, and stopped 3 feet from the boy, and looked. The county watched the Duke of Eversham's face do what it did. "He has my face," Matthias said. The words came out loud enough for the last row of guests, and rough as a keel on shingle. "The face I had at 5 years old, mine and my father's before me. And he bears the same forked mark over the heart. I bear it now under this shirt, in this room. I have carried it all my life." He turned so the room got his profile and the boy got his eyes. "This is my son." The ballroom made a sound with no word in it, 100 indrawn breaths at once. "His name is Milo," said Milo, into all of it, small and clear in his own voice, from under his mother's hand. In case anyone was wanting it. Rosamund kept her hand exactly where it was, on the shawl at her son's shoulder, and looked up, past the Duke, past the frozen orchestra, at the woman in silver on the steps, whose toast was still in her risen hand. "I held him at 6 weeks while Madame Fane opened his blanket," said Dorcas Baird from the doorway, plain as bread. 6 years ago, at the gate, in the snow. She saw that same mark and shut it out to freeze. Rosamund did not look away from the woman on the steps. "Moments ago you swore before God that you had never seen him. Is Dorcas lying, Lavinia?" No footman moved. No fan stirred. Nobody stepped into the space where Lavinia's protectors used to stand. Lavinia looked left and right along the room, and found, for the first time in 6 years, that the space was empty. The mark was darker then, and it proved nothing. The room heard the silver crack. Lavinia heard it too. Her chin rose. The glass in her hand began, very slightly, to shake. "Then you did see him at 6 weeks." Rosamund turned the admission gently toward the room. "For 6 years you called a child you had seen impossible, because you needed him gone." Lavinia stood on the steps, with the Countess's eyes on her, cornered at last between the lie and the cruelty. Because she had always chosen the cruelty. She chose it now. Yes. She threw it down like a gauntlet straight at Rosamund, her beauty blazing and terrible. "I sent you away, Rosamund. I turned you both back. He believed me because I gave his pride the wound it wanted. One whisper, and the great Duke of Eversham never asked a single question more. Do you know how easy you were, all of you?" "That will do," Matthias said. And into the silence after, quietly, the last of the silver running out of her voice. "I would not spend my life second to a woman who had everything." Matthias turned his back on her. It was more final than a shout. He faced the room his family had faced for 9 generations. "Hear all of it, since you are owed it. This lady lied, to my wife in my name, to me in hers, but the lie lived because I fed it. I accepted an accusation my wife was never allowed to hear, from a mouth that was not hers, and I called my pride grief, and stopped looking for her. The shame is hers, and mine. Milo, and he said the name, the way you set down something you have carried a long way, is my son. Before he is my heir, before he is anything this county has a use for, my son. And Rosamund Eversham remains Duchess of Eversham. Whether she returns to this house or to me is hers alone. "The boy cannot stand in the ducal set," Imogen said, shrill from the wall. "The last musket of a routed army." "Lady Imogen was there," said Dorcas Baird from the doorway. She laughed. "My son stands," said Matthias. "You helped close the gate on my wife and son. You will leave this floor and answer separately for what you knew." She left it. The crowd did not part for her so much as decline to be near her. At some sign of the Duke's, 2 footmen who had watched Lavinia command the house for years walked Lavinia Fane, white and wordless, out of the ballroom and up to a guarded guest room into the warm, because this house had thrown its last person into the snow. Lavinia left Eversham the following afternoon. She went warm and guarded, without the authority she had mistaken for ownership. Her papers went to the family solicitor. The steward and the porter were examined separately. Lady Imogen's version of the gate failed the moment Dorcas repeated her laugh before witnesses. No one was thrown into the snow. No one would ever again close that gate in another person's name. The law had never waited for a ballroom. The parish register had named him from his 8th day, Milo Matthias, son of the Duchess of Eversham. The room was only 6 years late in learning what the county's own book had always held. Matthias turned to his wife. He began, "Rosamund." She lifted one hand and he stopped, and let her speak first. That, she thought, was the truest apology he had made yet. "My terms, before your question, so the county can weigh them with us." Her voice carried to the last candle. "If I return, Milo is your son before he is your heir, and neither of us is ever spoken for again. No voice between us, not in love, not in anger, not for convenience. And he learns to have a father at his own pace, not at yours, and not at theirs. The school and livelihood I built remain mine, and the green room remains mine until trust, not title, moves me from it. I come back as a wife who chooses, or not at all." "Accepted," Matthias said. "All of it, unamended." And then, before the room, the Duke of Eversham asked, "Rosamund Eversham, my Duchess, will you choose me again?" The clock stood at midnight. The snow fell past every bright window. "On those terms, Matthias, yes," she said. "I choose to begin again. Do not mistake that for 6 years paid." The strange thing guests would say for years afterward was that the ball went on. Nobody wanted to leave. The roads were shut anyway, and the Duke, having remade his house in a quarter of an hour, looked at the conductor and said, "Well, it is 12th night," and the orchestra, shakily at first, then with feeling began again. Rosamund's dark shawl lay over the end of a bench by the doors, empty, its work done. Nobody moved it all night. A footman was seen to straighten it once, carefully, its corners squared like a flag. Milo got his floor. It was his mother who took him out for it, of course. That had been the treaty since he was old enough to make treaties. They took the quietest corner of the great bright room, and the county pretended magnificently not to watch, and failed. He counted aloud, 1, 2, and took the turn, and got it wrong, and set his jaw and got ready to be ashamed. Rosamund laughed, not at him, but up at the ceiling, at the night, a laugh 6 years deep. "Wrong together," she said, taking the turn wrong with him, exactly his mistake. So they spun out wide side by side, is a kind of right. They did it again, and got a little closer to true. Matthias stood at the edge of it, at parade rest, wanting so plainly that half the room ached watching him. He waited for the figure's end. Then we crossed the floor and went down onto one knee in front of the county, right down to a 5-year-old's height, until the Duke of Eversham and a boy in scuffed shoes stood eye to eye. "May I join your turn?" Milo looked at him a long moment. There was a 5-year-old's lifetime in the look, and a gate, and a lodge fire, and every night his mother thought he was asleep. He did not make it easy. She had never taught him to make things easy. "Why did it take you so long?" The dancers nearest fell quiet. Matthias did not look away, and did not reach for the boy, and did not once glance at the guarded stair where the answer could have been cheaply laid. "Because I believed a lie," he said, "and it flattered my hurt, so I stopped asking questions. I stopped looking, that is the whole of it. Men will tell you it was done to me, Milo, but the stopping was mine, and it cost me you, and I will be sorry for it all my life." Milo weighed him with the gravity he brought to all large claims: jam, weather, dukes. "One turn. You still have to learn me." "I do," said Matthias, Duke of Eversham, and meant it like a vow that the county heard. So the boy had his turn between them, his mother's hand and his father's, the figure taken at a 5-year-old's tempo, while the orchestra kindly lied about the time, and at the spin Matthias stepped the wrong way, honestly wrong, no courtier's flattery in it, and fetched up against his son. Milo looked at the Duke's boots, and then at his own, scuffed and certain, and said, "You rush it." Rosamund laughed again. This time the room laughed with her, warmly at last, with them and not at anyone, the sound rolling up into the garlands. They played until the candles were stubs. The housekeeper was seen to dance with the steward. Dorcas Baird sat by the doors with a glass of the good port someone kept refilling, no one would ever admit who, receiving the county's sudden respect with the expression of a woman who had known everything first, because she had. And when Milo's turns wound down at last, and he stood swaying, stubborn, refusing to be finished, it was to Dorcas he was carried. He slept against her shoulder with one shoe lost, holding a fold of her sleeve. Near midnight's far side, in the doorway where it had all begun, Matthias found his wife. "May I kiss my wife?" he asked, quietly, for no audience at all this time. The terms held even when no one was counting. "You may kiss the woman who chose you," Rosamund said. So he did. Snow falling past the open doors, the shawl on its bench, the music going on behind them, a kiss 6 years wide and very gentle, her cold hands warming between his, and neither of them was the first to pull away. They only came to rest, her forehead against his jaw, breathing. "Tomorrow he'll want the gate lowered so he can duck it," she said, against his collar where the mark was. "Tomorrow he owns the gate," said Matthias, and later still, the last figure of the night, the fires banked, the county yawning toward its borrowed beds, a small boy woke on a bench, imperious, and demanded what was owed. So the last thing the great room saw that Twelfth Night was Milo Eversham standing on his father's shoes, gripping his father's hands, while his mother walked backward before them and guided the turn, 1, 2, and this time, between the two of them at the boy's own tempo, in his own name, in the house with every door open, he got it right.